ignorance. They're doing. Hey, let's just practice. Practice.
BotRix has successfully joined the channel.
Context, and then you translate it into a language, and you use it in some have evidence. I'll put it into. Just once. Oh, tell me what? Because I don't know. Of course you know. But Russia is doing all of your data, the data that you so passionately and the FBI collect metadata. You were so turned against metadata. The phone every day. I talk about. But your opinion. I give this opinions on Fox, MSN. I give my own right. How that it was ideological arguments and to follow ideology. That's sort of that's a personal ideology. Right? Wait, personal. I am. I guess I'm bad for. Well, where do you draw the line? Turkish. I mean. My point of view, there's adversary. And adversary. And then there are unknowns or clear ally. You're going to support an adversary. I don't. Great for me. Outlet. Yes, bare minimum. There's minimum. How can you say that? Revenue, government sponsored advertising. If they're actual, would be supposed always got to be. And you're also there's always nothing's. I wish the Russian government radio channel or audience, the American people, voice of a CIA officer. Yes. We'll see a problem with that. Absolutely. In other countries? Of course we do. It's called influence campaigns. Voice of America. Therefore, they are so power. They're to Carlson, Vladimir. Are you? There is a crowd in the United States that is head of an officer and automatically credibility RT program. Now anybody, they may like you, they may like what you have. Hey, bro, buddy. No, wait. Like, I get it. I'm just for character costume. I'm a bit. Because that's my team right there, you know. I hope this. They just out. Now they're trying to violate me.
Oh, no way! My front right leg! Wow! And out. I like this. Not too crazy. Right, it's not bad, you know. Pro skiers. I'm a Pokemon champion. Damn right, bro. 100% that Charizard. My brother right there.
Or worse. Close. Full of violent. This is an athlete that don't happen. Your Monsignor actually out of. Well, I'm not.
Raw.
I've seen.
Strength.
As someone there ever very special guest today, Chris Steve Betty. I have to admit, I have never spoken from exorcism. I really want to thank you for taking the time, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. My pleasure, Shabo. Glad to be with you. So, talk about the devil. I think first and foremost is word defined. I would start with mention spirit. I'm going through chapter 6, verse 4 about the theme, and of course, in modern day Paul must have been in contact. They see beings, entities, fallen angels. I guess from your perspective, even spirits, where are they from? Are those in that we're seeing in the Bible? That everything God created, God can't create as God created purely spiritual, and we name them. Combination of real and also Christian. Souls are beautiful spirits, spiritual, but gave angels things free will. Wants us to come to love them and each other freely. Have to have free will. And unfortunately, that angels that fell out of presence. It's interesting because in well, the commentator Abraham and his tent built back to have a son Isaac. These were not free men; these were free angels. I want from them. Go to Abraham. It is, and it kind of are here. And there's another fascinating rabbinic exposition that God was creating the world. The angels went to him, create the world, make human. Because you know that by creating human, it's after their heart. They'll just from God looks at the angels. Oh, it's actually make human. All it process actually come to find me in a way that you just can't. I've read into it. As it were, don't have many explain. Talmud has almost a dichotomy as it pertains to how they view demons and these. So Abba Ben Yamin, Active, say that if the eyes were given the power to get, again for lack of it, demon, and no creature would be able to if their force were just powerful.
eyes, we can possess bodies, possess our spirits, our souls, and possess because someone's possessing us, and somebody asked me that the way the person found having the
Might be a silly follow-up question. Are they existing outside of the autonomy of God? They do their own free will and they guess whoever. Or is everything finally working out himself?
that God's active will. God, he's example. God is really interesting to me. Very grace active. Allowed. Good or and he doesn't think change. And they only allowed it so much because if they would be the first person that so they if they're very powerful and God changed them. For example, God does not allow demons to kill people directly. They can turn them and beat them up. So, how to do change.
So in the Hebrew Bible, and this is where I want to see Catholic Church's divergence and perspective, I would say the fundamental, foundational Deuteronomy 30:19. God tells his nations, like, I've created life and death, and peace I'm for you. Life. I can't force you to choose life only. This, that human beings, again, they're different than angels. They have autonomy. And I guess where I always get stuck in this conversation with demons is it sort of seems that when we talk about demons, there's the most powerful law, that's the devil. In Judaism, I'm not entirely clear as to the devil being a physical being. I don't see that being brought up in verses anywhere. But I guess if you could just educate me and educate those who are not part of the Catholic faith, what is the purpose of the devil on a day basis?
Oh, we say that so we will and chose college. Satan previously called her the light bearer, very high ranking angel. That's the highest are and heard Helen are and God is Ashley and changed it.
When I think of like the origin story, let's say, of Lucifer or of the devil, would it be accurate to bring in Garden of Eden? I correct me if I'm wrong. Many Christian commentaries will look at the snake, whereas Judaism would say this is snakes are horror, the inclination, internal battle. Say that no, that gosh, it literally is the devil himself. This is where we first see the devil appearing in the Bible. Is that an accurate characteristic?
That was Ashley and Adam and father of the one that lies in God. So Satan was by and he died. Yeah, we say that the evil spirit in the film It's very interesting. For example, in an exorcism, guys, when it starts manifesting, they will actually start and there have been others. For example, you start exercising, whatever, they will start ejecting out of their body. And as happened as exercise. Okay, anyway, some people actually take it, they can out of but they're also an image of a snake. Very
I guess I want to ask you about the practicality of exorcism you have seen firsthand. I also want to make sure I understand the theology first. I would agree with you. They have this saying in Aramaic, "Oh, beloved brother, love to love." God does. Right? God is benevolent. He loves us so much. He has a person talk about devil. Despite just the rudimentary way of asking the question, purpose. They had for what purpose? Devil create evil. What is the
now, talking about thank God. First question. People say, well, this God of yours is known. Right. And this is pretty it is how we but rather than we do you do. And so not part of God's plan. That's not part of anybody else. But this is the thing to say about God. God everything and the basic forms of so we would Israel. First we would I'm ever committed. Turn that sacrifice of salvation. Why does God create chance to exercise virtue? Ironically, God is God.
What about possession, for example? Are you implying that if we're prone to possession, if we stray from the words of God, engage in demonic forces like witchcraft, do things that don't have any authority in the New Testament or the Old Testament? Can someone be prone to possession? Is it just randomly occurring?
It's not random. And Satan doesn't do random. He's got a plan. Our plan, and let's of course, that's where thing is domination, an offense against God, and they were worshiping idols. What happens? Our idol are and fast. Problem for many young people. Just kidding. Witchcraft. Now read it.
It's interesting that because, of course, you're right that the Hebrew word for abomination is toeva, and there are very few times in the toeva abomination to describe something. Oftentimes it will just say this is a sin or it's the wrong thing to do, but in order to demonstrate or elevate the severity of that sin, use the word abomination. And I guess if we were to take your answer and then follow it, you've seen an uptick in demonic possessions, exorcism, given that there is a surge of young people engaging in the things we're describing.
Totally. All the exorcists are very sadly in cases. The dirt have it. This is that's what that protection for us. Okay. Only thing about it. Protector. All the and protected. Just as they do as our protector. Right. All this are praying faith, and they are practicing these nations. That's it. I did. Anything? I don't believe. And
I want to fix a little bit. It's back the and on it. Okay. I goes into what happened on October first? Proportions. The targets were catching. On the other hand, no, Israeli journal. Israeli. They believe to be free. Gaza, but Hamas don't carry. Wait, a very long. Heard about it? You know, you see advertisements now. New York, New Jersey, California, at synagogues where they'll have real estate afterwards, where you can buy land, really Palestinian Gaza. Really, government is planning now to turn into, you know, these comments by Jared Kushner, for example, about property in Gaza making incredible opportunity for a beachfront resort. That wasn't an accident. That was the plan. I think the Israelis are guilty of genocide. Not a term I use lately. You know, while of course I at least have the right to, you know, peaceful coexist, whatnot, I don't know. But international are going through of fire talk. Ongoing. Oh God. I didn't have the authority to agree on anything and compared to each other. Time to talk. Really. My very first day by the counterintelligence. And third officers and third officers. Declared officers. You're a CIA officer. You're serving our country. Takes you service that country. Officer. Yeah. You're to work for. You're a declared officer. Declared officer is somebody serving overseas. And is declared must mean that the head of the told that at the there are two declared officers. Shouldn't transition. Security. During 19, there were trained, really into I had been able to identify red America. I'm to steal. Why don't we? They're not checked. Where is really sad. On Capitol Hill. Foreign affairs. Fabulous. I know. Probably. Or earlier. I had two friends that I work with. Very good friends. We're kind of sabbatical. Perhaps. I've the chief already know them. If they are declared working with your people to be Arabic goods. Here, go to you're at the ambassador. And when home their living room furniture. That's something. That's what. Right. They finished their 2-year tour. Master Captain Rollins. Kind of a incident where the ambassador being driven president years ago. Tires blew up in his car. Driver, of course, pulled aside. Very helpful. And tires some. No. Remember these early version of AAA as they fell off. Had personnel. Important to understand there's faith there is the
Really go.
Israeli government. They are not the same thing. And in the United States, trying to protect nation protection. What unfortunately happens is that a lot of, especially Jewish people, American citizens, the idea of the Jewish faith and nation of Israel, if states, recognized government, state of it, right? They're not the same thing. Israel, as a country, government, security infrastructure, national priorities, economic, national security, and otherwise, exists as a nation that
Our enemies will fall.
nation that
ingredients, body, brain, and power. That's it. Air, shit, and getting a timer.
us. And here are daily policy.
That's at very true. They're in because the Arabs hate it. Forced them to work together. Fight the negotiation. Our direction of great increment. Remember the year of Bahrain. I'm at American president. Us Arabs. Air Sheikh. And before him, Dwight Eisenhower. Otherwise, he's as always for the Israelis. Administration after administration create asked American people. And I think it's because we struggle with the issue of creating real really never the
Right, so Netanyahu execute that policy. Environments, cabinet. Now he's an army of one, right? Right?
Look,
well, get rid of that one guy, Ben.
Benny Gantz left on his own.
But Itamar Ben Gvir is still very much there. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Oh, Ben. Right. How many for anti-crimes? Right. And apparently he's the guy who had like a bit of a terrorist. Yes. Portrait hang.
I think there's absolutely a stranglehold in the United States out the topic of
My feet hurt.
Long time.
In Judaism, spreading Judaism, especially both sides, right? Sunni and Shia Islam. There's definitely an element of it. And then there is a strong print of wealthy, money, hobbyists, entertainers, wealthy Jewish, everything. Just like there's wealthy Christians, wealthy Buddhists, everything, right? Comes from those benefactors in India. We also can have some very real benefit. And their policy, their Netanyahu. Kindly. Yeah. And some. And one of the things we're not talking about Iran and efforts to execute proxy conflict directions around Israel. That's what it's. Everybody is talking about in Pharaoh. They're all saying that's about and idea that.
What's up, guys? It's Thoughtful. I hope you guys are having a blast during the pre-patch. I know I am, but the Burning Crusade is right around the corner. So I want to get you guys prepared and ready for when we enter the Dark Portal. You guys can just hit the ground running, whether you're questing out in the open world, dungeon cleaving. We're going to go through it all. So let's get into it. Okay, we're starting with dungeon cleave. I'm gonna apologize, my voice is cracking a little because I'm still sick, so if that happens at all, just roast me in the comments, just go crazy. Demonology is the spec that I would recommend for you to run if you're dungeon cleaving. The AoE damage is great, single target damage is amazing. It's just like the best overall spec of what we need to do, and that's just blast dungeons as fast as possible. This is a pretty standard build. I mean, we have Unholy Power, makes your Felguard hit like a truck. Master Demonologist, you and your Felguard gets an additional 5% damage. Same as Soul Link, another 5% damage. Demonic Tactics, we're critting a ton. Our pet is critting a ton. Mana Feed is big. Every time we life tap, our Felguard will get some mana too. That way he can just continue to cleave and just do his thing. I have seen some people put 2 points into Improved Corruption to get it in sync with the GCD. That is big, but we're not going to do that right off the rip. You need Improved Shadow Bolt for the single target damage, and then you need Bane for both single target and AoE. Once you hit 61, go into Shadow Burn because it's just a great talent. I mean, it's big damage. And then you can put 2 points into Improved Corruption. The rotation is pretty simple. I mean, AoE, you put Immolate on 2 targets, run in there and cast Hellfire. Same time, your Felguard is cleaving and just going crazy. Single target, you're still going to put Corruption up. So we're just going to hard cast Corruption, cast Immolate, and then just spam Shadow Bolts until the boss is dead. I did run in Ubers with this spec, and the damage was amazing. I took some footage, check it out. This is the AoE portion. I cast Immolate on 2 targets. Reason for that is any more and you're delaying your Hellfire. So you want to get your Hellfire up. Felguard is pumping. I mean, I'll zoom in on the damage meter, but it's like this every pack. You're just doing so much damage. It is so fun. And then here's the single target damage. I did use the Black Book Trinket on this boss fight. I would recommend using that on every boss if you have it. It's broken, but I mean, guys, look at the damage. It is just, it's so good. Now, if you're a Demonology hater, you don't want to join the dark side, but you still want a dungeon cleave, this is the spec for you. So it's Demonic Sacrifice and Ember Storm. So Ember Storm increases your fire spells by 10%, and then will be
Yeah.
Second night. you.
My hand hurts.
Zug zug.
How am I summoning my imp?
Sacrificing our imp to get an additional 15% fire damage. So our fire damage is like through the roof. This is like a more mana efficient spec because we have Cataclysm. It's it's good on AoE, but the single target is just, it's not on par with Demonology. That's why I recommend Demonology, just because you're doing the best of both worlds. The rotation for this, you just, same thing, cast Immolate on 2 targets, and then you cast Rain of Fire, not Hellfire. It hits way harder. So that's the AoE rotation. Single target, you still hard cast Corruption, Immolate, and then just spam Searing Pain and just hope you crit. I did run this in the same Ubers group. I just swapped specs, so check out the footage. I know what you guys are thinking. You're like, oh, the damage is pretty good, and it is good on AoE, but it is so bad on bosses. I didn't even put footage of a boss kill in here because it was so bad. Just trust me. Moving on to questing. This will be a little different depending on what realm you play on, PvE versus PvP, but I recommend everybody try this spec when we first go through the Dark Portal. The sustainability is just through the roof. You'll never run out of mana, you're healing a ton, you can just chain pull mobs like crazy. So the idea is you have Shadow Mastery for just increased shadow damage, and then we're going to be sacrificing our Voidwalker. That way we're restoring health every 4 seconds. So this paired with Siphon Life and then Soul Siphon, you are just healing so much. And your Drain Life will not be interrupted as much because of Fel Concentration. So you literally, any mob you see, throw your dots on, move to the next target, throw your dots on that, and just keep on going. I'm not joking when I say this. You could literally go 270 without having to eat or drink at all with this spec. It's so good. Now, if you play on a PvP realm, that's where things get a little dicey. You're out questing and the other faction tries to mess with you. This spec gives you a little more in your toolkit to help prepare you for that situation. So of course we have UA, hard hitting dot. We have improved Talaterra, which makes it instant, which is awesome. And then it's kind of like the other spec. You throw your dots on everything. You can still chain pull with this. You just don't have that demonic sacrifice for Voidwalker giving you that extra health. But you do have Dark Pact. In case you need some mana, you can just use this on your pet. And so this just gives you a little more edge just in case you do find those PvP situations. And then the other spec I would recommend is our favorite word, Demonology. It is basically like having a little warrior in your pocket when you're questing. I mean, it'll tank for you. You can still throw dots, your Corruption, Agony, and then we do have Soul Siphon in this spec as well. So you will be healing a little more than usual with Drain Life. But this just makes it where you have your own little personal tank that you can quest with and make it a breeze. It doesn't have the sustainability as the first spec. You will have to eat or drink here and there, but it still does the job. Like always, I'll have all the talent builds in the description. That way you can quickly reference them. You don't have to watch the video again. But let me know in the comments what specs you were going to plan on running. Or if you have any recommendations on what I've provided. I'm happy to discuss anything. I've always said this channel is all about warlocks coming together, theory crafting, figuring out how to play our class the best. And if we can achieve that, that's a win in my book. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate all the love and support and all the subscriptions. Make sure to
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Gargos, and today I'm going to hit you with a video that's going to be very easy for me to make because I can talk about warlocks all day and all night. I'm going to give you a no BS guide to warlocks in the Burning Crusade. I'm going to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly. Nothing generic. This is all speaking from thousands of hours of experience playing this class. I have a love-hate relationship with this class. Sometimes I hate it. Sometimes I enjoy it. I think where I'm at right now is I'm back to loving the class. I'm back on the loving the class arc. So thank you for joining me today, guys. I'm gonna try to knowledge dump like everything I know about Warlock and TBC for you guys, and feed you some high quality Warlock propaganda so that you can cope super hard with me and play this class. All right, so the Warlock in Burning Crusade. Aesthetics wise, good looking class, yes or no? Yes, very good looking class. They're like the beefy boy caster, the caster that actually looks cool. Even though you're wearing a dress and stuff, you look sick. Like, mages have never looked sick. Mages have always looked trash. That is my opinion. Don't hate me too much for feeling that way, but it just mages that class for me, that's never really appealed to me, right? Warlocks always look great, especially in the Burning Crusade, man. Tier 4, Tier 5, Tier 6. Tier 5 is the one that's my logo. It's this. This is Tier 5, right? Tier 4 is, it's kind of like what I'm wearing right now. It's got the little lightning sparkles, the little, it's got this helm. Real quick. You know, a little like void portal type of helm. And I actually think it looks kind of cute on a gnome, you know. I'm not like a gnome enjoyer really so much, but like it's a cool, all the sets are great, man. And then Tier 6 is the one with the wings that come out of the head, right? all the sets are chef's kiss. The PvP sets are kind of similar to the PvE sets. So aesthetics wise, no issue. You're gonna look awesome. Let's see, let's go into leveling first. So leveling, I mean, it's actually pretty good. So you're gonna go this spec. You're gonna go Felguard spec. So yes, you're gonna unironically use the Felguard. This thing is freaking cool. It charges, I mean, it intercepts rather. It has a cleave. It's kind of like your own little personal warrior. That's really how it functions. It sounds cool. It looks cool. I actually love playing Demo as well, as far as like PvE. Like I'd play Demo as long as I could. You know, it's people thought it was better than Destro in the early tiers. It turned out not to be the case. Like, it can still hang in there though. Like, if you go to Warcraft logs right now and you go to like the first couple pages, you'll see a couple demos hanging in there, right? But you're pretty much going Destro at some point. And I personally like Warlocks when you're using shadow damage. It's always felt weird for me to use fire. It's just weird. Like, you even feel like more of a budget mage. And that's something that's an identity crisis that Warlocks players face in vanilla, in TBC. Grappling with your identity, trying to not face the insecurity that you feel like a budget Dollar Tree mage. You know, the mages are always living the standard issue good life, and the Warlocks are seething in the shadows, farming soul shards, you know. And soul shards, speaking of soul shards are just as cringe as they are in vanilla as they are in, they're just as cringe as they are in vanilla. It's slightly better in TBC, mainly because of one farm. There's one farm that's kind of like the saving grace. I'll start flying there right now. It's right over the pipe. Right over the pipe in Zangarmarsh. There's these eels, and the eels pretty much get like one tapped. So you can farm shards are pretty quick, but you also just rip through shards. Like, type something down below. I feel your pain, my brothers and sisters. If you've attempted to play Arena as a Warlock, you actually have to have the APM of a Grandmaster Zerg player from StarCraft, a Gosu gamer, in order to get through your pre-game ritual. You have to press like 47 buttons. Meanwhile, the rogue is just sitting there watching TikTok on his phone, put on a poison every like 30 minutes on his weapons. Soul shards are trash, dude. It's so bad that I'm not kidding. If there was a vendor that sold soul shards for 1 gold a pop, every Warlock would celebrate, rejoice, and pay that every time and never farm another soul shard ever again. It's that bad. So honestly, dude, like, it's that bad. I'm not kidding you. It's bad in vanilla. It's really bad in TBC. It's the worst thing about this class is soul shards. Absolutely awful. But anyway, that's not very propaganda-esque of me, but we're going to keep going. Anyway, leveling is pretty cool. You use a Felguard. Demo, Shadowburn, you can go into Kara with that. You're doing pretty good. The rotations is more interesting in TBC in a way, because you're actually using Immolate, using Corruption, you're multi-dotting a bit. There's also Seed of Corruption, which is an ability. You don't get that while leveling, though. You get it at 70. You guys might think Seed of Corruption is like the S tier AoE ability. It's pretty chill. Like, when it comes to AoEing, you do massive damage. Not the most AoE damage, because mages do the most AoE damage if they're really locked in and trying and, you know, actively playing the game. But damage per chill ratio, Warlocks are the best, right? Like, you can kind of just sit there. Like, my seed keybind is like caps lock. When I'm raiding, I'll just like drag it out of my spell book on a caps lock and just go tab caps lock and just throw out seeds. There's kind of like an upper limit on how much damage, like a cap you can do with seed damage, and the ability doesn't scale very well with spell power or anything like that. So, but yeah, you do great damage, and it's for very little effort, and it's pretty chill. I mean, if you are expecting though, like if your whole aura is that you want to be that dude in your raid, you want to be top dog, you want to be top of the food chain, you want your varsity Letterman jacket, and you want all the girls to be swooning over you, you want to be shoving nerds in lockers. I don't know if it's Warlock, man. I'm not gonna lie. Like in the early tiers, Arcane Mage is that dude. Even Warriors are pumping, but I mean, it's if you're in kind of a mid guild, you can be that guy. But I'm telling you, like if you are playing in a really good guild, it's harder and harder, man, to actually be like at the top in these early tiers, right? It's going to be Arcane Mages, it's going to actually be like Hunters and Warriors before you a lot of the time, and you can go Warcraft logs. I spent a couple hours the other day. We did a stream, right, and we went through every tier, every raid tier, and we went through like the first like couple pages of Warcraft logs. And obviously that's not the most like bulletproof way of finding, you know, rankings and stuff. People cheese logs, people do all types of stuff, but you can get a general sense, right? And there are some fights that Warlocks absolutely dominate on, and it's like just straight brick wall of purple class, but it's almost like a little bit gimmicky of a fight, those fights that exist. I'm not trying to say it's a bad class in terms of damage. It's good, but like comparing it to like brown class in vanilla, being a warrior in vanilla, like it's not that for the TBC. If you're expecting Warlock to be like that, you're going to be sorely disappointed, you know? Also, another thing that kind of sucks is you don't really like feel your gear. You know, you get a cool weapon, you get a little Nathrazim Mind Blade, you know, that cool like weapon dagger thing out of Kara, or if you get your that sword from Gruul, it's you know, it's okay, but it's not like you're not playing a melee class. You don't feel the weapon. There's not that same connection to your character. You know, you're just a caster Andy at the end of the day. But it's good. It's good in raiding. It's good across the board. Honestly, the more I'm talking about it, Warlock has a good quality of life in TBC. It's a very fun class to play. In PvP as well, you mainly play SLSL. SLSL means Soul Link, this ability right here, which splits your damage with your demon. And then you go down to this is a Siphon Life. So Warlocks are very tanky, but like everyone's kind of tanky in the arena, but Warlocks are extra tanky, but they're extra tanky when they have a healer. And one of the main reasons, other than Soul Link, of why they're really tanky, splitting damage with their demon, is this: it's Fel Armor. So you get 20% more healing to you. It's almost like a reverse Mortal Strike. So, you know, your Hellstone's gonna be dealing more, your Siphon Life, your Drain Life. If someone's healing you, it's 20% more. So basically, you know, starting in season 2 and beyond, you get a ton of armor on your gear. Season 1, it's weird how that works. Season 1 Warlock has kind of like standardized armor rates with all the other classes. For some reason in season 2, the armor is like super high on Warlock pieces. So between your armor, splitting damage with your demon, and Fel Armor, you are pretty tanky. But a lot of the times, like, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? And your pets in the Burning Crusade are cringe, man. They don't scale at all. They don't get your spell pen. They don't get your spell hit. They don't scale in terms of their health. They're just, this guy is as strong as he's gonna be for right now as he is in like season 4. And if a rogue has Warglaives and is absolutely kitted out of his mind with like Sunwell gear and Warglaives, like, yeah, he's just gonna pink mist your Fel Hunter. Like, and there's ways around it. You can start pre-casting a second Fel Hunter as they're killing your first one. You can have really good pet management. You can be on top of health funnel, you know. And that's the thing that I've noticed in vanilla as well, is good Warlocks find a way. They don't have a standard issue way of farming and being OP as mages, but they have a more creative solution to like kind of accomplish most of what a mage can accomplish in a lot of ways, if that makes sense. And I'm talking about like gold farms. Like, they have these weird funky gold farms where they can like subjugate demons. They can demonic sacrifice their like Void Walker for like HP 5, and they can go in there and like pathing manipulate dot stuff and kill stuff and make a decent chunk of gold, right? Meanwhile, mage pulls the entire dungeon and just like blizzards it all to death, you know. So it's you battle with this thing. Like you're unique as a warlock. Your tools are very unique. Like you don't mages control stuff by turning it into a sheep or a pig or a turtle and then slowing everything. Warlocks are unique. You have many control tools. You have the most binds in the game. You can seduce something with the succubus. You can subjugate a demon. You can drop an infernal down from the sky and summon it out of nowhere and stun a bunch of people and use that. You can just have like your Voidwalker tank something. You can fear something. You can also Howl of Terror something simultaneously as fearing something. You can Death Coil something. Like you can Curse of Tongues something. With one button you can reduce your casting speed by 50%. You have a range slow, and Curse of Exhaustion is actually pretty good in the Burning Crusade. That's this ability right here. So it's like 10% in vanilla. In TBC it's 30% base. It's actually really good, and you can amplify it up to like 50, I believe. So yeah, honestly, Curse of Exhaustion is really good on the Warlock in TBC. Very underrated ability. But the playstyle in PvP, because I'm kind of rambling, you actually do a lot of damage, but it's not like high tempo, big burst damage. It can be if you get lucky with Nightfall procs. That's like a talent you have that gives you an instant Shadow Bolt. But you actually, like, damage per global, you're probably the best damage per global class in the game. Like if you just run up to something and click one button and put an agony on something, that it's pretty insane damage, right? Like you kind of just have to triple dot something, and you learn as a warlock over time that just pressing those 3 globals is actually like you're presenting lethal on board. Like it's a lot of damage, just those 3 globals you press, you know, and learning how heavy that is something you'll experience with time, because that took me a long time, and it's still something that I deal with, is like knowing that that's enough pressure and now I don't have to be here anymore and I can go bandage or reposition or do whatever. So your dots are very powerful. You have a lot of dots as well. You know, you have Immolate, Siphon Life, Corruption, Agony. You also have a new dot called Unstable Affliction if you decide to go Affliction spec. Affliction brings some kind of utility in the raid as well, and some people can play Affliction, but it's kind of like an edgelord type of spec. Like I think it reduces physical damage done by like 5% of the boss. So I don't know if like the Sweat Lords are going to really even run that. I think the Sweat Lords are just going to plow through all the content and not really care, and just you know, stack warriors or stack arcane mages or hunters or whatever. But it's a fun class. There's a lot of finesse to it. The sets look great. Like PvP, the playstyle a lot of the times is you dot one target and then you're controlling the other targets. So you're throwing up tongues on off targets, you're fearing off targets, you're spamming fears. You do feel like you have a lot of control. Let's see here. So as far as Destro goes, Destro is kind of like a PvE spec. You end up switching over to fire damage, and you end up going like pretty much most of the way down Destro, and spamming a new ability called Incinerate. It looks pretty cool. It looks like a fire snake type of thing. So you put an Immolate on stuff and then you incinerate. In PvP, it's kind of niche, but it's also not like so bad. Like it's if SLSL is A tier, some people might consider it S tier. You know, like Destro is like B tier or something. It's not bad. It's just not as good. I think UA lock is actually pretty good. Instant Howl of Terror is insane, and I've been playing a lot of that recently. I think UA is actually really fun and good. Yeah, as far as gearing goes, like out of the box, tier 1, you buy Frozen Shadow Weave, which is tailoring. You craft that. And then you can buy Spell Strike as well, which is BOE. It's going to be kind of expensive, but there's actually a lot of BOE gear. The gearing process is not too bad. You get the Thrallmar Sword or the Honor Hold Sword. You get the Lower City Exalted offhand, and it's a bunch of BOE pieces. Frozen Shadow Weave, Badge Trinket. Yeah, and you're pretty good to go. I will say, like, one advantage of Warlock, right, is there are some fights in TBC that do go really long, and there's no way around it. It's just a long fight. Think like, you know, Illidan or like Kael'thas, or, you know, no matter how it shakes out, it's gonna be like a 4-minute fight, a 7-minute fight, an 8-minute fight. And a lot of times, even in the Sunwell, you look at the kill times in the Sunwell, they're still pretty long fights. Like a Brutalis fight that's like 3 minutes or 4 minutes. Like, Warlocks are...
It's time! Hey everyone, it's Apex, and today we're going to be covering all 30 specs in Wrath of the Lich King plus one, because there really are like 31 specs in Wrath, and where they stand dueling wise, and there's going to be one big ways of stopping them, and then Judgment of Justice with Paladin. So it's a very good spec, however, it can struggle a lot against most of the melee. So it's either going to go top of A or probably low S, but I think I'll probably put it low S because it can still get really good RNG, and with the right kiting, it can do well. And now we have Elemental Shaman, the best caster in Wrath, but not the best dueler. They struggle with a lot of things, even things like a warrior where you can consistently root them. They'll still be able to get out of one of the roots with the Blade Storm, and with the pressure they can do with Mortal Strike, they'll be able to get you before you're able to recover. And that's kind of the story with most of the other specs. They'll lose to DKs like that, they'll lose to Feral Jews just power shifting all of their roots. They'll lose to pretty much all the Hunter specs. Maybe they can beat Survival, but BM and Marksman will just run them over, silence them, feign death every cast they do, and just KO them. So Ellie's not the greatest, and I will be putting it pretty low in the B tier. Now we have the Shadow Priest, which is actually an amazing dueling spec. And if this list was assuming that there was line of sight, this might be the number one. This spec is extremely strong, and it can actually win easily. It's doing strategy against certain specs where it doesn't even want to waste time casting, like let's say an Arms Warrior. They can be doing the Arms Warrior and just maybe get like a lot of damage in Wrath. Amazing. And also Fear on cooldown will eventually get a Fear on the Warrior. They can't break all of them. And it's easy to do that because you can just spam DP over and over and it'll do a lot of damage. So this spec's extremely strong, and I will be putting it ahead of Subrogue. This spec is amazing, and it can also take out a lot of healers as well. Like for instance, this might be one of the only specs that can consistently beat something like a Holy Pally, because you can just fear them on cooldown, and then all of its dot damage in a fear will eventually allow it to take somebody out. And then they even have the option of mana burning if somehow they can't do that. So Shadow Priests are an amazing dueling spec. I have Holy Priests. Very squishy. They can do decent damage, but most of these things on this list will be able to KO them. So I'll be putting them pretty much at the bottom of the healer tier. They technically could mana burn some of the other healers and do a ton of damage. So really strong. And with enough fears on Paladins, it can actually beat something like a Frag. You're able to mana burn it to where they can't judge to get their mana back. Disc will be able to beat even things like Paladins, and it definitely can beat Hunters, which kind of hilarious. Okay, now you have Ret Paladin. They are amazing duelers. If you have decent gear, even without decent gear, they're still very good duelers because they have a lot of healing, really high burst, and we're going to also assume that you can't use Lay on Hands, by the way. Forgot to mention that. So even without Lay on Hands, just using your Divine Shield typically, you'll be able to kill a lot of things. Divine Shield will let you live through a lot of the specs. You'll be able to just immune some sort of CC against some casters, for instance, and you'll just be able to keep attacking them, even doing your half damage with Divine Shield up, and you'll be able to take them out. So this spec really doesn't have too many bad matchups. Its only matchup it can kind of struggle with a little bit is some of the casters like a Shadow Priest or a Destrolock sometimes. But if you're running the Glyph of Instant Fear against Undead or Demons, you'll be able to fear the Lock Pet constantly. You won't have to worry about the Succubus or the Fell Hunter. And then you'll be able to get like full Hajj, full Repents on the Warlock, and then get big heals with that. Or just prevent him from kiting you so you can do big damage. So this spec's extremely strong. I'll be putting it pretty high, but behind Shadow Priest for sure. Also, it destroys all rogue specs. Pretty much the Ret, Prague, and Paladins can destroy all the rogue specs easily. Okay, now we have the Guardian Druid. Not really. This is Prague Paladin. They're very similar to Ret Paladins. They have slight differences though. The Prague Paladin will have a lot more survival and healing, so they'll be able to do a lot better against the melee because they'll have the higher armor, and then they'll constantly gain the Reckoning procs because melee will be hitting them all the time, especially things like rogues and enhanced shamans. They'll be able to have constant healing procs, and they can just use all their free globals on that because they will have full uptime on the melee targets. While the Ret, on the other hand, can do much better against the casters like Destrolocks, Ellie Shamans, Mages in particular, because even if they're getting kited briefly, or they come out of a fear, or they got to catch up to a blink, they eventually will catch up to them. However, the Ret will be able to do a lot more burst with his Judgment, Crusader Strike, Divine Storm, which the Prague doesn't have two of those three abilities. And then they'll have the two-hander, which will just hit harder. So they'll be able to do more burst out of the CC and then the armor doesn't really help them survive at all against casters. And then they're not going to have as many globals free to Art of War proc because they're not going to have as much uptime anyway like they would on a melee. So it's going to go right next to Ret, but just bear in mind, Ret can do better against some casters, and then a Prague will basically do better against all the melee. Now we have Prot Paladin. They do get a talent that gives them a lot of healing. I think it's called Touched by the Light or something. But unlike Ret and Prague, they don't get the instant Flash of Light proc, and that's where most of the healing comes from. You can't just stand there casting Flash of Lights and Holy Lights as Prot Paladin. However, the spec is very tanky and actually has extremely high damage, and then the range silence it has is very, very powerful. Without the silence, they would go really low because they would lose to pretty much all the casters, but with the silence, they can actually do decent along with the high damage. So I'll be putting this one pretty high. I think I'll be putting it probably right ahead of Enhance, or maybe just slightly below it. The Prot Paladin will do way better against pretty much all melee, but the Enhance will do better against casters. So that's the main difference there. I would say Enhance maybe has better matchups across the board, but then the Prot Paladin has much stronger matchups against the melee. So I probably would put it just right below it, but they're really close. You really can't go wrong where you put them. I have Holy Paladin. They can actually take out a lot of classes. They can beat Hunters reliably. They can beat Rogues reliably, which is hilarious when you think about it. And they can actually even beat Warriors. So Holy Paladins are actually a very good healer dueling wise, but they'll still lose to things, or they just won't be able to win. And the things that they can lose to is mainly like Affliction Warlock and Shadow Priest are probably the two worst. They can lose to Warriors, believe it or not, and DKs, because if they can line up some sort of CC, maybe get some good RNG, a good kick, then they'll be able to get the bubble. And then once the bubble's gone, if you can get them before their next Hand of Protection, you will be able to win. And something like a DK can deal with that. The Warrior will have to save his Shattering Throw most likely for the second Hand of Protection, which is second bubble, I mean. And then the DK will be able to just do his crazy damage with the second Gargoyle. Now we have the Grand Wizard, the Frost Mage. Now I played a lot of Frost Mage, specifically dueling in the original Wrath of the Lich King, and I always thought they were extremely strong, except that Destro Locks were one of the hardest matchups possible for them. However, in my experience of now playing the private servers a ton, you know, many years later, and the meta evolving, Frost Mages struggle with a few matchups very hard, in particular things like the Destro Lock or even Affliction Lock, Demo as well. They just spam Curse of Tongues, and even with Decurse, you're not able to keep up. And sometimes you can even if the battle goes really long, but typically they're just going to be out damaging you when you have a massive casting debuff on you. And then they'll be able to disrupt things so that you won't get huge shatters on them. And the Destro in particular has Nether Protection, so they just take like 30% less damage the whole time. Plus they have Soul Link up, so then they're taking way less damage overall. So that's a really hard matchup. Ferals just power shift them over and over, so you can't really root them or slow them, and they're just on you nonstop. You usually have to block really early, and then the second you're out of block, you are under immense pressure again, and then they can just pop their bark skin and just tunnel you with their defensives up. So that's another really hard matchup. And then they don't have the freebie like Warriors like they used to. They still have a good edge against Warriors, but Warriors can definitely take games off them. I'd say it's maybe like 60-40 or 65-35 or something in the Frost Mage's favor, because the Warrior gets so much healing through the second wind and Blood Craze, and they'll be able to just stay alive by staying in defensive stance and throwing up the Reflex, which the Mage will constantly have to juke, but all that time juking will also reduce your damage, of course. And Warriors will have a lot more charges because you can actually use charge in combat, unlike BC. So if you're coming from Vanilla or BC as a Mage, the Warrior matchup is nothing like it was. It's not just, okay, I can win with no gear on. It's not like that. So, Frost Mage, so where does it stand? It's still extremely good. It's not the best dueler, definitely not, but it is still good, and it can beat some very good specs. So I'll be putting it probably on around here, or maybe a little ahead of Enhancement, but it's still good. It just struggles a little bit against some of the top, and also DKs are very hard. Okay, now we have Fire Mage. Very similar to Frost, a little worse though. Not a ton worse though. It can do better against some matchups just by the nature of the constant disarming. So specs that really need their weapon really just struggle with the fact that they have no AMS. So for instance, they will struggle a lot to beat like a Ret or a Prague Paladin, because especially a Prague, because they'll just constantly be getting Reckoning procs, so they do huge damage, and then they'll be spamming big heals. Well, Judgment of Justice, so the Pharaoh can't really go and kite. The Pharaoh can't get like roots and then go heal. The Pally will just dispel them. It really can just clone and heal itself. And the Pally is healing itself a ton anyway. And then the 1v1 situation with like a sub rogue, it's really just if the rogue can get the opener. If the rogue gets the opener, it can destroy them. But otherwise, the Pharaoh will just destroy the rogue over time just with its way stronger survival and still huge damage, while the rogue can't get away with its vanish because of the bleeds and fairy fire. The Pharaoh's very good. It can also struggle a little bit though with some of the prots like Prot Paladin and a Prot Warrior. Can just chop it out of nowhere. But overall, it's very good. It doesn't have too many bad matchups, and it has a lot of pretty close matchups. So this one's very good, and I'll be putting it probably near the top. It could go maybe ahead of Rogue, but I'll just put it right behind it, as Sub Rogue is still insane, especially if they're really good. Now we have the Boomkins. Now, if this was with pillars involved, or any kind of line of sight, this would be extremely high, as Boomkins can easily go kite, heal up to full, reapply damage, and then Starfall is such a short cooldown that can constantly reset to get that back up, kind of like our Rogue with its 1-minute Shadow Dance. So they struggle with a few things. One is kind of getting run over, and the specs that can do that to them is things like Feral Druid, Sub Rogue. They can basically just destroy him very quickly and prevent the Druid from actually kiting them so that he can get some breathing room to heal. So those are pretty bad. DK is also a really bad matchup. It can do pretty good against warriors. For instance, a Prot Warrior. And the Prot Warrior can do massive damage and reflect. When you get the dots on the Prot Warrior, they'll die really quickly because they usually have low resil. And then you don't even have to cast. You can just run away and heal while the dots rot them. And then the Arms Warrior is a little harder. We can still take them out, just abusing Roots and Cyclone. So overall, Boomkin's very good, but it doesn't really have any really favorable matchups against any of these top 2 tiers. So I'll be putting them probably on the lower or the higher end of A. It could maybe even go low S, but that's where I'll be putting them. And finally, we have the DKs. So with Blood, now you might think, okay, this is a really good spec for dueling melee. It kind of is, however, if you're against ones that can heal, in particular ones like Enhanced Shamans and Prague/Ret Paladins, because they do have a lot of healing, it can actually be very hard because you pop your cooldowns as Blood and then they'll eventually outdamage you while healing about as much or more. The Blood really isn't that good. It can have some really strong matchups, specifically against like rogues. It can easily beat rogues, but it's really not that great. But it's going to struggle a lot against a huge chunk of these, so that's why I'll put it lower. Pretty much all the casters it has a horrible matchup against. I have Frosty Gate. This one's pretty decent, and it has very high damage along with having the Hungering Cold. So you have that 1-minute cooldown, so if you somehow get to the second one, if you're playing someone who's a little more defensive, you would get that second Hungering Cold, and then you get all your runes to recharge, and then just smash obliterates into them, and they'll die very quickly. A lot of its damage though is physical. The really big crits come from Obliterate typically, and a lot of the top ladder is melee. So it's going to struggle against a bunch of those, but like for instance, a Frost Mage, it can really prevent the Frost Mage from kiting, and then it can just chop them up with Obliterate. So it's very strong. It'll just not do quite as well as the Unholy variant, but I'll also be putting it pretty high, probably around here, but then it'll have sort of a bad matchup versus something like a Prot Paladin. So it can do better against some of these other ones, but one below it, like the Prot Pally, who's not as good against casters, while the Frosty DK is better against casters. And then finally, we have the Unholy DK. I'll be playing a lot of Unholy myself. This spec is very strong, has a ton of good matchups. Really, its only bad matchup is the Ret or Prague Paladin. In particular, Prague is a lot worse, but it can basically have a favorable matchup against everybody else. And then it has some sort of close ones, like a really geared Arms Warrior. It's probably like 40-60 in favor of the, or 60 in favor of the Unholy DK. Really not too many bad matchups. It can sometimes get like gibbed down by a Sub Rogue with the Shadow Dance and Dismantling, but typically they're able to survive and kite a lot of these specs and get the kill. And they actually have a really good matchup against Shadow Priests, who are pretty difficult for most specs to beat. So I'll be putting them as number 1. They are extremely strong duelers. And throughout the original Rat, they actually got nerfed pretty much every patch throughout. And by the time the Ender Rat came, that's more of their balanced state, but they're still basically the best 1v1er. So that is my list, guys. If this was helpful to you, please throw the video a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next one.
In dual tournaments existed, Retribution Paladins dominated today, further removed the competition.
Let's get this party started.
What you want? Lita.
Our enemies will fall. Anu Belore Delanar.
Everything has a price.
State your business. Be ready for anything.
Your gold is welcome here. We will have justice. Our enemies will fall.
enemies will fall. We will.
Glory to the Sindori.
AI viewers stream book. Com.
What business have you?
Baladash Malinore.
Having a class race. I know what class I want to play in Wrath. I know what class. That's actually not too bad. What the hell?
I don't know what I want to do, man.
I have one-of-a-kind items. Remember the Sunwell. Anubilore Delana, the eternal sun guides us.
I have one-of-a-kind items. Be ready for anything.
Oh. I'm gonna get back on the hunter. The hunter just has everything and hell yeah.
What is going on, guys? This is Earpugs, and in this video I'm going to be covering a 2v2 arena tier list for Classic Wrath of the Lich King. This tier list does assume the 3.3, and here is the final tier list for 2v2 arena and Wrath of the Lich King. I of course did not mention a bunch of comps in this 2v2 tier list, seeing as there is so many. However, I tried to cover the most common major 2v2.
I'm trying to think, if I do a caster, it's gonna be fucking maybe Shadow Priest, the more I think about it. I have one, don't I? I do, it's not fucking listed on here. Alright, I can give Priest a try. I know I have one. How it feels. Do I want to do? I'm gonna get back on the hunter, dude. I keep going back to the hunter. All 3v3.
What is going on, guys? This is Earpugs, and in this video I'm going to be covering a 3v3 arena tier list for... Here is a final tier list.
All right. Boy, have we come full circle, man.
To cover, so I just chose a bunch that are very good. None of these are bad. Without further ado, let's get started. Looks like first up on our list here, we have Beast Cleave. This comp has one of the scariest openers in the entire game with Bloodlust, Spirit Wolves, Bestial Wrath, 2 Freedoms, Purge, and an MS effect from the Hunter's Aim Shot, which is an instant cast. This comp has the potential to absolutely demolish any target that it connects to in the opener, and if you don't peel their opener and or outpressure them, it's almost guaranteed that you're gonna die. This comp, along with many other Cleave comps, will be very good in the beginning of Wrath of the Lich King, seeing as people will have lower health pools and less resilience. While this is a very strong comp, BM Hunters are a little bit nerfed when you compare them to TBC, seeing as Bestial Wrath is now a 10-second duration instead of an 18-second duration like it was in TBC. On top of that, Hunters can actually be disarmed, which will remove their ranged weapon now. So if you're able to disarm a Bestial Wrath that's only 10 seconds, it obviously is going to make that Bestial Wrath not very scary. However, if they don't kill somebody in the opener, they do start to fall behind a little bit, especially when they're fighting spell cleaves and different control comps, seeing as they're not going to have the pressure they need to land a kill. With that being said though, their opener is absolutely bananas if they can get it off, and it's very likely that somebody dies if they played correctly. This lands itself a spot in the bottom of the S tier. Up next is Boomkin Rogue. Now, this is actually a surprisingly strong comp for Wrath of the Lich King, seeing as both DPS start off in stealth, and can almost always get the start that they want to, with being able to sap one target and then come out and clone another one, or even Typhoon somebody off of a ledge. This comp also has a ton of control, seeing as they have Sap, Blind, Cyclone, Entangling Roots, Cheap Shot, Kidney Shot, Gouge, and Fear. Boomkins and Rogues have a ton of control for any team that they are fighting, plus an absolute truckload of damage thanks to Starfall and Ambush. Not to mention the fact that the Rogue has Wound Poison, which is 1 stack now, so if they shiv that on one time, it's instantly 50% healing reduction, which is very, very difficult to deal with for a lot of healers. This comp can 100-0 almost any target in a matter of seconds if the Boomkin is free casting and lands a Starfall, and the Rogue also lines up their Shadow Dance with a bunch of ambush spam. This gives them huge swapping potential, seeing as Starfall and Shadow Dance are both a fairly short cooldown, so just about every minute they're going to have a chance to absolutely destroy somebody. A big drawback to this comp is that both the Rogue and the Boomkin are fairly easy targets to kill, so if they don't generate huge pressure in the opener, they can start to fall behind fairly easily, and it is very hard for this team to reset, seeing as they don't have any serious defensives or reset defensives like a Paladin would have, etc. While you could run this with a Paladin, that still wouldn't change the fact that Boomkins are very squishy and so are Rogues. Overall though, this comp has huge one-shot potential and a very strong opener. This comp lands itself a spot in the A tier. Moving on to Cupid Cleave, which is Ret, Hunter, Disc Priest. This is a very, very, very strong comp and gets so many buffs going into Wrath of the Lich King, making this an absolute monster in 3v3 Arena. This comp has tons of control, tons of damage, an MS effect from Aim Shot, loads of survivability, and a double dispel for magic effects from the Paladin and the Priest, which makes it very, very hard to control this, especially as a spell cleave. If I said this comp was very strong, I would be underselling it. This is one of the hardest teams to fight in the entire game when played correctly. Controlling it is very difficult thanks to that double dispel, not to mention the fact that they have 2 freedoms, one from the Paladin and one from the Hunter. As far as defensives go, they also have Bubble for the Pally, 2 deterrences for the Hunter, and Pain Suppression for the Priest, so they have a really good chance to survive a lot of bursts. This comp absolutely excels at putting out immense pressure on any target they are hitting, thanks to the MS effect from aim shot, plus the Hunter's damage and the Paladin's damage being very high as a baseline damage. Not to mention the fact that they have a ton of CC to go along with it for the healer, like Hodge, Repentance, Scatter Shot, Silencing Shot, Freezing Trap, and Fear, plus the priest being able to purge the target clean of whoever they're trying to kill with Dispel Magic. Overall, this comp is insane to say the least and lands itself a spot in the S+ tier. Looks like FMP is up next. Now, this comp is much stronger in Wrath than it was in TBC, thanks to a whole host of buffs that the Pharaoh gets. For example, they now have Berserk, which is absolutely insane damage when they pop this. On top of that, they also get Predatory Strikes, which gives them an instant Cyclone anytime they perform a 5-point finishing move, which is very often in the game. It's also very hard to cast into this comp, seeing as they have 2 ranged kicks, along with a good amount of CC like Polymorph and a ton of slows, not to mention the fact that Pharaohs actually have a real stun now, seeing as Maim doesn't break on damage, so that is basically a kidney shot, and of course the Priest having Fear as well. A couple big negatives to this comp though is the fact that the Pharaoh doesn't give them a Mortal Strike effect like a Rogue would with Wound Poison, so that means that they really have to have very scripted goes to land a kill, because if the healer is able to cast into his teammate, it's unlikely that you're going to kill them. Also, Pharaohs and Mages are fairly squishy in Wrath of the Lich King and decently easy to kill. Nevertheless, this is a strong comp when played correctly and lands itself a spot in the A tier. On the topic of Pharaohs, looks like Jungle Cleave is next. Now, this is a comp that has absolutely insane burst damage while also having a ton of CC and mobility, since the Pharaoh can shift every slow in the game as well as all routes, on top of them having a passive speed buff. The Hunter also has Disengage and Freedom, allowing both of the DPS to be extremely mobile and very difficult to get away from. Combining that with the fact that the Hunter has an aim shot giving them an MS effect makes whatever they're hitting very, very hard to heal. Not to mention the fact that the Feral is throwing out instant cast Cyclones the entire game, making it very, very difficult to generate any pressure, seeing as anytime your DPS is going to pop a cooldown, they're just going to instantly eat a Cyclone. And that, of course, doesn't even reference the fact that the Hunter has Scatter Shot, Freezing Trap, and Silencing Shot. Combining all of that pressure with the Priest's Fears and Purges, this comp is a very, very scary sight to see on the other side of the arena. The only downside to this comp is that if you are able to shut the Hunter down or the Feral down, they usually can't recover, seeing as this is a very momentum-driven comp. But nevertheless, when played correctly, Jungle Cleave is absolutely insane and definitely lands itself a spot in the S tier. Speaking of Ferals, we have Kitty Cleave up next. Now, this is a very straightforward comp. The main concept is to have both the Feral and the Warrior connect onto a target and then destroy it. They have MS from the Warrior along with loads of damage from both classes. However, a glaring problem that this comp has is that if you're able to shut down the Feral, it's basically just the Warrior doing damage and the Feral has to sit in bear form, which will inevitably put them behind, and if this comp isn't generating pressure, they're not doing a whole lot because their whole thing is that they're doing a lot of damage, so if you're shutting that down, that's basically all they can do. This is one of those comps that's very good at lower MMR because it's very easy for both the Warrior and the Feral to just connect to one target and destroy it. Most people aren't really peeling that well at low MMR or out pressuring. However, once you get into the higher MMR with Kitty Cleave, you will start to fight teams that understand that the Feral has to go into bear form if you're destroying him. Don't be mistaken, this comp can literally one-shot almost any target in the game, but if they don't generate a monster amount of pressure in the opener, they will likely start to fall behind. The only real CC they have is Cyclones, plus a Fear with a very long cooldown, and some random stuns and kicks. Combining all the pros and cons, Kitty Cleave overall goes into the B tier. Up next, looks like we are talking about one of the Mac Daddy spell cleaves, which is LSD, aka Lock Shaman Druid. This comp usually runs with a Destro Lock, Ellie Shaman, and a Resto Druid, while there are very many variants of this. When played with these specializations, they have the highest single target burst in the entire game, with Lava Burst and Chaos Bolt. This is a comp where if someone is caught out of position for even a few seconds, they can very easily get 100-0'd if both the Destro Lock and the Ellie Sham are able to both cast into them. This is a comp where if you waste your trinket, you basically no longer get to play the game, seeing as all three classes are able to land CC chains of 30 seconds or more with the Lock's pet that has Seduction, the Lock's Fear, Death Coil, Shaman's Hex, the Druid's Roots, and the Druid's Cyclones, as well as Bash. LSD is one of the strongest 3v3 comps in the entire game, no questions asked, and when played correctly, it feels almost impossible to beat. This comp definitely lands itself a spot in the S+ tier. Speaking of LSD, we now have LSD2 on the list. This is a comp that runs with a Boomkin instead of a Resto Druid, and then also runs with a Resto Shaman instead of a Eli Shaman. The Warlock can also play Destruction or Affliction. However, in most situations, it's going to be an Affliction lock because they partner so well with the Boomkin's dots. And for this example, we're going to say it has an Affliction lock in it. This comp has the highest AoE burst in the entire game, thanks to the lock being able to dot up the entire team with Unstable Affliction, as well as the Boomkin's dots and the ability to pop Starfall, which is the highest AoE damage in the entire game next to a Sweeping Strike's Bladestorm. If they are able to get full dots rolling on all 3 people and the Boomkin pops Starfall, they will literally kill all 3 targets at the same time. The amount of damage that this comp does when it's left to free cast is absolutely unhealable, and you need to control the Boomkin Starfall or else your loss is almost guaranteed. This is an extremely powerful spell cleave, seeing as they have tons of CC like Fear, Hex, Cyclone, Entangling Roots, Spell Lock, Death Coil, and Bash. Not to mention all the utility that your Shaman gives you like Tremor Totem, Purge, Wind Shear, Bloodlust, and much more. This comp, when played correctly, is very, very strong. And its only real downfall is that if you're able to sit on the Boomkin or if you're able to sit on the lock and just shut down their damage, they won't be able to generate that much pressure. However, they have all the CC in the world they need to peel you off of whoever you're trying to kill, allowing them to get away in most situations. And combining all this together, LSD2 lands itself a spot in the S tier. Moving on to another spell cleave that is very strong, we have MLS up next. Now this comp can be played with either Fire or Frost, and also Destro or Affliction from the lock, depending on what playstyle you guys are trying to do. You can also replace the Resto Shaman with a Resto Druid, and it's pretty much just as good. MLS is a comp that can literally CC you for eternity, seeing as they have enough CC where they can actually just full chain you and then wait for the DR to be off and just rechain you again. For example, they can Fear you into a Polymorph, into a Seduction, into a Nova, into a Slow, back into a Fear, back into a Polymorph, vice versa, etc. So much control this comp has, it's very, very, very strong. And of course, mages and warlocks do tons of damage in Wrath of the Lich King. This is another very, very strong spell cleave, and definitely one that you will see at the top of the ladder. MLS lands itself a spot in the S tier as well. Moving on to an absolutely horrifying comp to deal with, we are talking about PhD, aka Paladin, Hunter, Death Knight. This is played with a Holy Paladin, Marksmanship Hunter, and an Unholy DK. This comp has some of the highest sustain damage in the entire game, and it also has an MS effect from the Hunter's aim shot, making it almost impossible to heal the target if both DPS are connected to it. Since they play with a Hunter and a Paladin, they have 2 freedoms to ensure that the Death Knight is always on their kill target and never ensnares. Another huge feature of this team is that the Holy Paladin gives this comp the ability to absolutely all in the other team with little risk of them dying, seeing as the Paladin can literally run in with them and bubble anytime they get into trouble. They also have bop for their DPS as well, so they can bop their DKs out of kidney shots or any kind of a physical stun, etc. Combining all of the Hunter's CCs together with all of the Death Knight's damage, this is a very, very scary comp, and it must be controlled or else they are guaranteed to kill somebody. All in all, this comp is very scary for multiple reasons and lands itself a spot in the S tier. Moving on to another cleave, we have Ret DK Priest, aka Vanguards. While this comp doesn't have a Mortal Strike effect, it does have a lot of survivability and a ton of damage. The Priest and the Paladin can both dispel magical effects, making this team very hard to get under control, seeing as you have to CC both of them at the same time in order to prevent them from dispelling each other. Not to mention, the Paladin can also be dispelling rogues' poisons, completely negating them in most situations. This is a comp where if the Paladin pops wings and the DK uses Gargoyle, they are almost guaranteed to kill somebody as long as they both connect, along with all 3 classes having decent defensives as well as self-heals. The only major downside to this comp is that if they don't get a kill when they pop their cooldowns, their sustained damage usually isn't enough to land a kill unless they land some kind of crazy CC chain on a healer, and they have limited CC to begin with. Nevertheless, it is a good comp and lands itself a spot in the A tier. Moving on to RLS, aka Roguelock Shaman. This is a comp that has good control and pressure, but is also extremely squishy. They are able to lock down teams pretty well and secure a good opener with Sap, Cheap, Kidney Shot, plus Fear and Death Coil, all while the Shaman purges the kill target clean, making them much easier to kill. When played correctly, this comp has huge switch potential since the lock will try to keep full dots on at least 2 of the 3 targets at the same time, allowing the rogue to call any kind of a swap if they find somebody is out of position. By far, the biggest weakness for this comp is that all 3 classes here are pretty easy to kill, especially if they're fighting a cleave, which forces them to play near perfectly if they want to kill against TSG or PhD, etc. They do, however, have a pretty decent toolkit to peel any target off of the Warlock or the Rogue, seeing as they have all the stuns, Gouge, Blind, Fear, Sap, Coil, Shadow Fury, etc. However, if they mess up their CC chain even once, or if they start to overlap some CCs, it's very easy for them to fall behind and simply lose because of it. This is a decent comp in Wrath of the Lich King, but it is very, very hard to play, and this lands it a spot in the B tier. Up next, we have RMD, or Rogue Mage Resto Druid. Now, this comp is not as good as it was in TBC, since Resto Druids can't play as aggressively anymore, since they have no Feral Charge, and Bear Form also being slightly worse than it was in TBC, due to armor scaling. It still has a Rogue and a Mage, of course, which are a very good combination. Also, Blind no longer shares a DR with Cyclone in Wrath of the Lich King, allowing them to have a very long CC chain on a healer. If the healer trinkets, they can land Polymorph into Blind into Cyclone, which is 26 seconds of that healer not being able to play, not to mention Counterspell or any kind of extra CCs they can throw at them out of that. Both the Druid and Rogue can also stealth in this opener, allowing them to usually open how they want to. This comp does have a monster amount of control and some pretty high burst damage if the Rogue and Mage connect. However, it does fall apart rather quickly if the opener they get isn't perfect, seeing as all 3 classes are very squishy and Resto Druids specifically are fairly easy to kill for most cleaves. All in all, it is a decent comp and it goes into the B tier. And of course, we can't talk about RMD without talking about RMP. Now, this comp is still very strong in Wrath, just like it is in TBC, thanks to their insane opener combining the Rogue stuns with the Mage's Shatter and the Priest's offensive dispels. If played correctly, RMP can beat any comp in the entire game, which makes it very strong. Disc Priest also receiving a fair amount of buffs going into Wrath of the Lich King helps this comp out a lot. It plays very similarly to the way it does in TBC, and there's not too much to say about this comp other than it's just very good, which you probably already all know from TBC. This comp lands itself a spot in the S tier. Speaking of classes getting buffed in Wrath of the Lich King, looks like RPD is next, aka Rogue Shadow Priest Resto Druid. With Shadow Priest receiving a number of buffs to their survivability and overall damage, RPD actually becomes very strong in Wrath of the Lich King. This is a comp where if they catch a target out of position and the Shadow Priest is able to cast into them, it is almost guaranteed that that target is going to die as long as the Rogue can lock them down. This comp's burst is astronomical with Mind Blast, Shadow Word Death, and the Rogue's ambushes. Not to mention the fact that the Rogue has an MS effect from their Wound Poison, making their already insane damage very difficult to heal. On top of that, Druids not being able to be polymorphed and the Shadow Priest being able to dispel all magical CCs off of their teammates makes this team very hard to land a CC chain on them. They can also deal with cleaves pretty decently, seeing as they have so much control and 2 disarms. The only major downfall to this comp is that if the Shadow Priest gets shut down and can't put any pressure out, they will undoubtedly fall behind because the Shadow Priest is the #1 person on this team that gives them the kill pressure. However, this comp has all the tools they need to completely peel the Priest and allow them to free cast on whichever target they choose. Adding all of this together, this puts RPD into the S tier. Moving on to Scooby-Doo Cleave, aka Ret Paladin, Rogue, and Disc Priest. This comp has a very high amount of damage if both the Ret and the Rogue are able to connect onto one target, while also having an MS effect from the Rogue's Wound Poison, allowing them to generate huge pressure on any target they are hitting. Since this comp is usually ran with a Disc Priest, that gives them 2 magical dispels, making it very hard to lock down the Priest, seeing as the Paladin will always be dispelling them, forcing you to CC both of them at the same time and try to kill the Rogue. On top of that, they have Hand of Freedom and tons of control with Fear, Cheap Shot, Kidney Shot, Repentance, Hodge, Blind, Gouge, and Sap. Adding all this together, Scooby-Doo Cleave is definitely a strong comp. The only downfall to this is that the Ret has no real gap closer, and if the Ret gets kited for long enough, they will inevitably start to fall behind. Nevertheless, it is a good comp, and it definitely lands itself a spot in the A tier. Looks like Shadow Cleave is up next, which is Unholy DK, Affliction Lock, and Holy Paladin. This is a strong comp that excels at fighting in longer games. The concept of this is to dot up the entire enemy team while spamming fears and having the DK switch targets to whatever they can hit and generate the most pressure on. This is a very high blanket damage comp that never really runs out of steam, seeing as if the Warlock runs out of mana, they can simply life tap, and the DK has no real resources besides runes and runic power, which never run out. So they are very good at rotting teams to death and outlasting the other team. Of course, Holy Paladins also have a ton of mana regeneration and are very good at healing with low mana as well. The biggest flaw to this comp is that if the lock gets shut down, the DK won't be able to put out enough pressure by themselves, and they will start to fall behind. Overall though, it is a good comp, and when played correctly is very, very scary. This comp lands itself a spot in the A tier. Looks like Shadowplay is up next. This is another comp that gets a bunch of huge buffs going into Wrath of the Lich King, specifically Resto Shamans and Shadow Priests. What makes this comp so scary is the fact that they have a lot of just blanket damage, while also having the ability to land huge burst windows if the Shadow Priest is able to cast. Not to mention the fact that they have a pretty fair amount of control with Fears, Hexes, Death Coil, Wind Shear, and Spell Lock, while also having the Shaman there to be able to purge all the magical buffs off of the enemy. This team actually also has 2 magical dispels, one from the Shadow Priest and one from the Fell Hunter with Devour Magic, making it pretty tricky to land a CC chain on any one target, seeing as they will almost always be getting dispelled if you aren't covering your CCs. Shamans also having Hex gives this team a fantastic CC for not only peeling whoever is taking damage, but also locking in kills, since most teams are not going to have a D-Curse to deal with it. This is a very strong spell cleave, and when played correctly, it is able to demolish any target that comes within line of sight while also rotting the enemy team at the same time. It does suffer from the main problem that any spell cleave will have, which is if the lock or the Shadow Priest gets shut down, they aren't going to be generating much pressure, and therefore they're not going to be able to land a kill. Regardless though, it is definitely a very, very strong comp and lands itself a spot in the S tier. Up next is one of the scariest 3v3 comps in the entire game, which is called Shadowplay, aka Shadow Priest, Frost Mage, and Resto Shaman. This comp has one of the highest bursts in the entire game and can very easily 100-0 any target in a deep freeze. On top of that, running it with a Resto Shaman gives them Bloodlust, Purge, Hex, Wind Shear, and Grounding Totem. Not to mention the fact that the Shadow Priest having Psychic Scream into Polymorph alone gives them a very long CC chain. The Shadow Priest also has Psychic Horror now, a Blanket Silence, and the Mage of course still has Counterspell. If you're able to somehow live that giant barrage of CC chains, don't worry, because the Shaman has Wind Shear to make sure your healer cannot cast a single global and will purge off any kind of shield or healing buff you give to your teammates instantly, making it extremely hard to beat this team if they land a CC chain while your healer has no trinket. Not to mention the fact that the Shadow Priest has Dispel Magic as well, allowing them to double purge targets, and also take any kind of CCs off of their teammates like Polymorphs and Fears, etc. If the enemy healer has no trinket and gets caught into any kind of a CC chain, that's pretty much the game right there. I can't stress enough how absolutely insane Shadowplay is in Wrath of the Lich King, and when played correctly, it definitely is one of those comps that makes it feel like it's impossible to beat them, seeing as they have so much utility and so much damage. This comp lands itself a spot in the S+ tier for a multitude of reasons. Moving on to a surprising comp that shows up in Wrath of the Lich King, we are now talking about Spicy Chicken Cleave, aka Fire Mage, Boomkin, Resto Shaman. This is a comp that has a lot of damage and control, thanks to Living Bomb plus the Druid's Dots, and of course Cyclone. The biggest strength this comp has is the ability to be constantly cycloning 1 out of 3 of the enemy team at all times, which on top of not breaking on damage also locks their health bar in place, seeing as you're not able to heal into a cyclone. This creates a dynamic where the longer you go into the game and the more trinkets you get from the enemy team, the further the Spicy Chicken Cleave gets ahead as long as they're landing those cyclones. Not to mention the mage having tons of CC with Counterspell, Dragon's Breath, and Polymorph of course. If you let them free cast, this comp can definitely spiral out of control very quickly and land themselves a win. However, it suffers from the same spell cleave problem, where if you sit on the Boomkin and they can't get their Cyclones out, they will struggle to gain any kind of pressure. All in all, this comp definitely lands itself a spot in the A tier. We are now moving on to, in my opinion, probably the strongest comp in the entire game, if not one of them. We are now talking about Thundercleave. This comp is Arms Warrior, Ele Shaman, Holy Paladin. Thanks to the truckload of buffs that all 3 of these classes and specs get going into Wrath of the Lich King, this comp becomes absolutely insane. The baseline amount of damage that this comp can put out at any time is astronomical. All the Elite Shaman has to do is hit a Lava Burst into a Chain Lightning, and as long as the warrior is hitting that person with Mortal Strike up, they have a very high probability of landing a kill. This comp also has a fair amount of utility with Grounding Totem, Tremor Totem, Hand of Freedom, 2 Sacrifices, Bop, Bubble, Hex, and more. The constant threat from the Elite Shaman's Wind Shears make healing against this an absolute nightmare, seeing as you have to fake your cast every 6 seconds or else it's going to be interrupted by that. Combining that with all of the warrior's off charges and kicks, they usually don't even need to land any kind of a major CC chain to land a kill on somebody, since they have so many cast breaks. This is a comp that goes from not that great in TBC to absolutely beyond fantastic in Wrath of the Lich King, and for a plethora of reasons lands itself a spot in the S+ tier. On the topic of unhealable damage, looks like we have TSG up next, which is Arms Warrior, Unholy Death Knight, and Holy Paladin. This is an extremely famous comp for a multitude of reasons, seeing as it has the highest consistent damage output of any comp in the entire game if both the DK and the warrior connect to one target. On top of that, the warrior is giving an MS effect to any target they are hitting, adding an absurd level of pressure. If any healer is caught with both of these classes on them, there is a 100% chance that that healer will be dead in a matter of seconds if they don't get peeled. The amount of cast breaks that this comp has is absurd to say the least, seeing as they have Pummel, Mind Freeze, Strangulate, Charge, Intercept, Dual Stun, and Death Grip, not to mention the Paladin's Hodge. That is 8 separate ways for them to stop you from casting, on top of absolutely nuking your health bar when they are on you. What's so crazy about TSG is that this comp does so much damage. If both the warrior and the DK were connected to a healer, and the healer was hard casting heals in front of them, the healer would still die because the damage is so high. The only way to stop this comp is to either out pressure them so they have to play defensive, or to peel them so your healer can get away. Once you get their cooldowns and trinkets, their damage does fall off a little and becomes manageable as long as you're peeling them. However, a failure to do this will guarantee your defeat. TSG, for obvious reasons, goes into the S+ tier. And the last comp for this tier list is WLS, which is another blanket damage comp that has very high sustained damage thanks to the lock's huge dots and the warrior being able to hit multiple people at once with Blade Storm as well as sweeping strikes. While this comp does put out big damage, it does have one very glaring weakness, which is that the warlock is very squishy, and warriors aren't that great at peeling people off their teammates. This forces them to play extremely aggressively and means the warlock has to have near perfect positioning to avoid dying to most teams. However, if they are able to get some momentum going, the Resto Shaman's Purge spam plus Bloodlust allows them to generate huge pressure, not to mention the warlock having a Devour Magic from their pet, being able to sometimes get the warrior or shaman out of any kind of a magical CC, all of that potentially landing them a kill. Combining all of that together, since the warlock is so fragile though, and the warrior having little peels as well as the shaman to save them, this comp does go into the B tier. And there you have it. Here is a final tier list for Wrath of the Lich King 3v3 Arena. I pretty much only covered meta comps here, and there is definitely a ton of comps that I didn't cover, since there is so many comps you can run in 3v3 Arena for Wrath of the Lich King. If you don't see a comp here that you're thinking about playing, do not think, oh, it's not viable, because that is simply not true. You can literally play almost any comp to high rating in Wrath of the Lich King, since it is much more balanced when compared to TBC, and a lot less cookie cutter and gimmicky. This, of course, is a tier list for a 3.3.5 patch, and an average of all the arena seasons 5, 6, 7, and 8 put together. I will be making a lot more Wrath of the Lich King content, as well as finishing up my TBC How to Kill series, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you guys in the next video.
Yo, welcome to another video. It's been a while since I've done a tier list video. It's been a while since I've done a good, true classic Wrath video, and I'm super excited to talk about what we're talking about today. And today is going to be one of those helping you choose your main for Wrath Classic. I feel like this is coming at a really good time too. My current Classic TBC guild just posted some early signups on preference for classes that you want to play in Classic Wrath. So people are already talking about what do they want to play in Wrath. So let this video be a guide for you to help you kind of figure out what you want to play and where you're going to be needed, what kind of play style is right for you, what's going to be strong, what's not. This will help you kind of get into the right mindset at least. But Don't take anything that I say here too seriously, as at the end of the day, this is your main. Don't let me pick your main for you. This is what you want to play for the entirety of Classic Wrath. Please just use this as like a tool for you, and just good content. So I have 5 categories here. I'm gonna put some classes in highly recommended. We have a recommend / alt territory. A lot of classes that I think are just great, fantastic for a lot of reasons. Either they're super fun, super strong, or a combination of both. I have some classes here in the middle that I think are definitely useful, that you want in your raid comp, but maybe you don't want too many of them, or maybe they're just really boring and I just don't find them too exciting. So if you feel like it, you can totally play one of these classes. We have this other category. I say it's avoid unless needed. So either classes that you just don't take at all to your raid, you would be totally fine and content bringing 0, or it's just a class that like I just find particularly boring. And then lastly is Kekel. And honestly, I'm just gonna throw out some Kekels real quick. You know, Subtlety Rogue is not a PvE spec, and this is strictly PvE. Strictly PvE. If you want to talk about PvP, obviously Subtle Rogue is awesome, but just gonna go ahead and throw that one out there. Frost Mage as well, and then BM Hunter. Now, I've said it a million times, but there are the niche situations where you maybe want a BM Hunter if you don't have a Ret, or if you don't have an Arcane Mage, if you really just feel like getting that extra % damage done. But you're pretty much never going to have a BM Hunter. Maybe if you feel like playing it in dungeons, you can play BM, but that's it. These are classes that I for sure will not be recommending in this video. They just don't seem to make sense for what this video is implied for. So let's jump right into it. Let's see. We have Combat Rogue kind of out of place here. We'll throw that at the bottom, and let's go ahead and start with DKs and just go in order here. So first up is our Blood DK. Absolutely love this class. Obviously, if you're familiar with my channel, you know that I'm a DK main at heart. But truth be told, I don't think DK tank is for everyone. I just don't think it is. That's something you'll have to soul search for yourself, for sure. To me, they are the second best tank in the entire game, just behind Prot Paladin. And they are technically better than Prot Paladin in terms of main tanking duties and single target tank duties. Especially in tier 9 and in tier 10. So they're phenomenal. You definitely want a Death Knight tank in your raid, especially in tier 9 and tier 10. But if you have one in your raid earlier than that, then that's okay too. To me, I gotta put it in the if you feel like it territory though. I just don't think they're fantastic alts. To me, I want my alts to either be really engaging or just really OP. And I just can't even put them quite there in the alt territory because they are niche. They have some layers to their complexity, but at the end of the day, your basic rotation is just spam Icy Touch. And it's a pretty bland tank for that reason. I just enjoy a lot of the theory crafting that goes behind DK tanks. So this is a tough one, definitely a tough one to start off with. So if you're playing a tank and you don't want to play Prot Paladin, DK is definitely going to be my recommendation. But besides that, that's where I gotta put Blood. Alright, moving on to Frost. Now, I'm definitely biased here because I am a DK guy. But Frost to me goes into highly recommend. Frost is just really good, you know? It's super strong, especially strong early. And they don't need a lot of gear. So even if you're not maining a DK, but you want to maybe play one as an alt, and you could throw this into the alt territory, but if you're trying to figure out what you want to main, I think Frost is a great choice. I'm not going to complain if I have 2 Frost DKs in my raid, at least for a while. And eventually you could even just dual spec into Unholy and switch to Unholy later on. Look, Frost is super strong. The gameplay gives me carpal tunnel. This is kind of why I'm turning away from Frost, because my fingers hurt so much when I play it, but it's actually super fun. It's pretty simple in terms of all you're doing is hitting a Blitz and Frost Strikes for the most part, but that proc with Killing Machine is really satisfying, and I do really enjoy those crits from it, and it's just a really fun class. I think they'll be particularly strong in Classic Wrath too, because when we talk about, you know, speed running or even just overall damage is something that Frost DK is going to be really good for, that a lot of classes will maybe have struggles with. Frost DK is constantly on the go, and they sacrifice nothing for movement. Nothing. They will always be able to move and continue to keep good damage up. unless of course their mob runs ahead of them too fast. So Frost is great. Similarly, Unholy has got to go right up there in that S tier, highly recommended tier. I think Unholy is everything that Frost is, but just better in terms of picking a main. I think there is more complexity to Unholy. It doesn't give me carpal tunnel. And it's super fun. It's super flavorful. I think the pet management is super simple. If you're a guy who maybe doesn't like having pets, I don't think Unholy is really all that bad. It's a simple pet mechanic. It's a pet that you can kind of, you know, sit on, attack, and then forget about. You don't have to do too much thinking. To me, the snapshotting gameplay of snapshotting your gargoyle is really, really fun. I can't tell you why exactly, but there's something super satisfying about knowing that when I hit this summon gargoyle button, that it's going to absolutely pump as long as I can maintain uptime on that boss. So I think Unholy's great. They do sacrifice a little bit of overall damage when mobs move, maybe like out of their D&D, for example, but for the most part, Unholy